Welcome to the deep dive. You send us sources and we dig into them to pull out the key ideas and maybe some surprising bits without getting lost in the weeds.
Exactly. And today our source is a YouTube video. It's from the Peace Through Understanding channel.
Right, it's got this Arabic recitation of Surah 4 and Nisā, that's the women, in English with subtitles, all set against nature scenes.
Yeah, and Surah An-Nisa it's a really significant chapter in the Quran. The verses we hear right at the start in this clip, they jump straight into some big themes.
Like what kind of themes?
Well, things like where humanity comes from, family relationships, how society should work, inheritance. It covers a lot of ground, even in just these initial verses.
Okay, and just to be clear, this is obviously religious text. Our aim here isn't to endorse any specific viewpoint, right?
Absolutely not. We're here to understand the content, the information presented in the source you gave us, these specific verses.
Yeah.
It's about knowledge extraction, basically.
Got it. So our mission for this deep dive is to explore these opening themes and instructions from Surah An-Nisa, as presented in the video.
Let's do it.
So that first verse, it starts with this call to taqwa. How is that usually understood?
Well, it's often translated as piety or maybe mindfulness of God, being conscious of him. But the verse immediately links it to something else.
Which is?
Our creation. It says humanity came from a single soul, and then its mate was created from it, and from those two, spread all the men and women.
Ah, okay. So it's grounding that piety in our shared origin, kind of emphasizes we're all connected.
Exactly. Think of taqwa as this deep sense of awareness and responsibility, knowing you're accountable, and linking it to a single origin. That underlines a fundamental equality right from the start. It sets the stage for treating each other fairly.
And the second verse seems to echo that.
It does, yeah. It brings up piety again and connects it to oaths, things sworn by God, and also kinship ties the womb, specifically, reinforcing that idea of divine oversight and the importance of family bonds.
Then the focus shifts quite clearly, doesn't it, to orphans?
Yes, very directly. There are instructions about their wealth. Don't exchange their good property for your bad stuff. Don't mix their assets with yours to consume them.
And it calls that a great sin. Pretty strong language.
Extremely strong. It highlights just how serious it is to take advantage of vulnerable people, especially children who've lost their parents.
What's interesting, though, is how it connects this right away to marriage.
Right. It says, if you fear you won't be just towards orphans, then you can marry women who seem good to you 2, 3, or 4.
Oh, okay.
But then, crucially, it adds a condition. If you fear you won't be just, even in marriage, then stick to just one wife, or those your right hand possesses, which historically refers to captives or slaves.
So the principle of justice is paramount, whether dealing with orphans or wives.
That seems to be the link. Justice towards orphans is essential, and that same standard of fairness should apply if you're considering multiple marriages. It's like a baseline for how you should act ethically.
Interesting, that baseline idea. Then it moves on to women's rights more directly, specifically about the dower, the sadaqat.
Yes, the instruction is to give women their dower willingly, as a gift, a naila.
A willing gift. That sounds important.
It really underscores that it's her right, given freely, not grudgingly, but it also adds a layer of flexibility.
How so?
It says, if the women of their own good pleasure remit any part of it to you, then you can enjoy it with satisfaction. So it allows for mutual agreement and recognizes her agency in that decision.
Okay, that makes sense. Then the scope seems to widen again, talking about financial responsibility more broadly.
Yeah, it warns against entrusting wealth, which it describes as something God has provided as a means of support to the foolish or those lacking sound judgment.
So not giving control of finances to people who can't manage them.
Exactly. But instead of just withholding it, the instruction is to provide for them from that wealth, clothe them, and importantly, speak to them kindly.
So it's like a protective measure, but also a supportive one, a kind of community care.
I think that's a good way to put it. It sees wealth not just as private property, but as having a social purpose. Those who are capable have a responsibility towards those who aren't, providing material support and respect.
And this responsibility loops back again to orphans specifically.
Yes, with practical guidance. Test orphans until they reach the age of marriage. See if they show rushed maturity, sound judgment.
And if they do.
Then you hand over their property to them. But there's a warning, too. Don't consume it wastefully or, quickly, before they're old enough to receive it.
Right, don't try and use it up before the handover.
Precisely. And it even makes a distinction based on the guardian's own situation.
Mm.
If the guardian is rich, they should completely refrain from using the orphan's property. If the guardian is poor, they may take a reasonable portion for their services.
Okay, so there's nuance there. And it mentions witnesses.
Yes, call witnesses when you return the property. That emphasizes transparency, accountability, making sure everything is done properly.
That seems really practical.
Mm.
Then we get into what looks like quite detailed inheritance laws.
Extremely detailed, yes. It establishes that both men and women have a right to inherit from parents and close relatives. A designated share, nasiba mafroda.
Regardless of how much or little is left.
Yes, whether it's small or large, there's a specified portion. And historically speaking, establishing a legal right for women to inherit was, well, quite significant.
Giving them a form of financial security they might not have had otherwise.
Exactly. In many societies at the time, inheritance often went exclusively through the male line. So this was a major shift, establishing defined shares for various family members.
It's not just the direct heirs either, is it? There's a mention of other people present at the division.
Right. If other relatives or orphans or the needy are there when the inheritance is being divided, even if they aren't legal heirs according to the shares, they should be given something from it.
And spoken to kindly.
And spoken to kindly. It shows that community spirit again, that compassion. It's not just cold, hard calculations. It's about maintaining support within the wider family and community, especially at a difficult time, like after a death.
Okay. But then, right after that compassion, there's another really stark warning about orphans' wealth.
Yes, incredibly stark. Those who wrongfully consume orphans' property are said to be consuming fire into their bellies.
Wow. Fire.
And that they will enter a blazing fire. Sair. The imagery is intense. It frames it not just as theft, but as a profound spiritual crime with severe consequences.
Definitely makes the point clear. Then it lays out the actual shares. For children.
For children, the rule stated is the male gets the equivalent share of 2 females.
Okay.
If there are only daughters, and there are more than 2, they collectively get 2/3. If there's only 1 daughter, she gets half.
So very specific ratios depending on the number and gender of the children.
Yes. These ratios have been discussed and interpreted a lot over time, but the text itself provides this clear structure for dividing assets among the children.
What about parents? If the deceased had children,
Each parent gets 1/6.
and if there were no children, and the parents inherit,
Then the mother gets 1/3. But if the deceased also had siblings, the mother's share goes back down to 1/6.
interesting adjustments. And this is all after debts and bequests.
Correct. Any valid bequests or outstanding debts have to be settled first, then these shares are distributed. It's a very systematic process.
What I found really striking was the verse explaining why these shares are set this way.
Ah, you mean the part that says, your parents and your children, you know not which of them are nearest to you in benefit.
Exactly that. It's presented as an obligation, a forida from God, implying there's a wisdom we might not fully grasp.
That's a key interpretation, yes.
Yeah.
It suggests these aren't just arbitrary rules, but are based on a divine understanding of family needs and dynamics, perhaps looking beyond immediate appearances of who might seem more beneficial.
Then it covers spouses, too.
Right. Husbands get half of their wife's estate if she has no children, but only 1/4 if she does.
Again, after debts and bequests.
Always after debts and bequests, and for wives, they get 1/4 of their husband's estate if he has no children, and 1/8 if he does.
So it clearly defines the financial stake for both partners.
It does. It establishes their rights within the marital estate and provides for the surviving spouse.
And finally, in this section, it addresses a situation called kalala. What's that?
That refers to a person who dies, leaving no parents or children, no direct ascendants or descendants.
Okay, a less common scenario maybe. What happens then?
If that person has a brother or sister, each of them gets 1/6. If there are more than 2 such siblings, they share 1/3 of the inheritance.
Again, after debts, bequests. And it mentions something about the bequest not causing harm.
Yes, provided no harm was intended by the bequest, it aims to cover various family structures comprehensively.
And this whole set of rules, the inheritance laws, the guidance on orphans, marriage, it's all framed at the end as what?
As the limits set by Allah, the hudud. These are presented as divine boundaries.
With consequences for following or transgressing them.
Exactly. Obeying God and his messenger leads to paradise. Described as gardens with rivers flowing beneath, it's called the Great Success. But disobeying and transgressing these limits, that leads to hellfire and a humiliating punishment. It strongly emphasizes the divine authority behind these guidelines.
Okay, so let's try and bring this all together. From this deep dive into just the opening verses of Surah and Nisā via the source you provided,
Mm-hmm.
we've seen this powerful start emphasizing piety linked to our shared human origin. Then, really detailed instructions on looking after orphans, their rights, especially financial.
Right, and the establishment of women's rights, too, both in marriage with the dower and, significantly, in inheritance.
Yeah, those defined shares are striking. Plus, the broader ideas about financial responsibility looking after the vulnerable in the community.
And that very clear systematic approach to inheritance for children, parents, spouses, even the call-out situation, all framed as divine limits.
And just to reiterate, we focused on understanding the content as presented in these verses from the source material. We haven't gone into deeper theological interpretation or endorsement.
Correct, just exploring the information and themes laid out in the text we looked at.
So here's a final thought for you, the listener. We've looked at these ancient directives from over 1,400 years ago, dealing with family, money, justice, social responsibility. Thinking about them now, outside their original religious context perhaps, do they offer any insights for our conversations today?
That's interesting, like discussions about fairness, protecting the vulnerable, individual rights versus community obligations.
Exactly. Are there any principles in there about justice, financial ethics, family structure that you think still resonate or feel relevant when we talk about building a fair and compassionate society now?
What endures? That's a good question to ponder.
Something to think about. We definitely encourage you to explore the source material further if you're curious. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.